If you're going to pivot your niche or expand your niche, I think there's four key questions that you want to consider. The first one is, why do you want to pivot? Why do you want to change? Is it for business reasons or personal reasons? Business reasons, meaning obviously you think it's a better business move, it's going to make more money. Personal reasons, you're just tired of working with the people that you've been working with, or you're interested in work, you're excited to work with other people. And there's no right or wrong here, but I think it's really important to think through for yourself and understand, okay, I'm going to expand my ideal audience. Why am I doing this? And it might be a little bit of both, but I think it's helpful, even if it's both, I think it's helpful to go, this is the primary reason. Like, I want to do both, but I'm primarily doing it for business or I'm primarily doing it for personal. If you're primarily doing it for personal, you want to make sure, are you prepared to take a step back, shrink your audience, potentially shrink your client base, right? If you're doing it because my interests have shifted and my interests are over here and I want to help those people, that expansion, that shift, that pivot, whatever it is, even if it's a contraction, that may impact your bottom line. It may impact your audience. It may impact a bunch of things in the short term negatively. So you just need to be sure that, okay, I'm doing this for personal reasons. It might short term not be great for business, but that's a calculated decision that I'm making and is okay. On the flip side, if you're primarily doing it for business reasons, you want to ask yourself, are you sure you're excited by the new direction aside from the potential results? Because a trap is, I'm going to make this shift because it's good for business. I think it's going to be good for business. And maybe you're right, but you don't want to work with those new people. So you wind up succeeding and then being miserable. So whichever way you're doing it, making sure that you sort of, I'm going to make this shift. Here's why I'm making this shift. I'm okay with the good, bad, or otherwise that's going to happen in the short term, that may happen in the short term from doing this. It's just a way to pull apart and think through this decision, as opposed to a lot of people just going like, all right, I'm going to pivot. And like we said in the beginning, you're not even going to pivot. You're actually going to expand, which is different. The second question I think it's important to consider is, and we talked a lot about alignment before, but what's the alignment between your new messaging, content, and offers? So if you're going to expand, some language is probably going to change. Language about who you help, how you help them, what the transformation is, and just thinking through, what is that new language? How does this change things like my bio, my product descriptions? Does this change the content I'm creating? And what are these keywords? What is my voice guide going forward about how I'm going to talk about stuff? So that's something to think through and make sure you have that alignment. The third thing to consider if you're going to pivot your niche is, what's the story behind the shift? So you may tell this publicly, you may not, you may tell it subtly, but it's worth thinking through, why are you making this shift? And starting with the truth, right? For yourself of, this is why I'm doing it. And then how do you message that to people? If someone comes back to you and goes, I don't understand, you used to always talk about leadership and now you're talking about performance. What's the deal? You want to be able to talk about that, both reactively to questions you get and also proactively. So if you do go on podcasts or you do in social posts or newsletter or whatever, you can tell this story. There's a story to be told behind any pivot or expansion. That can be a million different things, but it could be as simple as, I've spent years helping medical healthcare people with X, Y, and Z. And then I had a friend who wasn't in healthcare, but had these same problems. And I told him to do X, Y, and Z, and he did it and it changed everything. And it's made me realize that what I'm actually teaching is relevant beyond healthcare. And that's why I'm expanding, right? So creating a narrative that explains why you're doing this, which will help people, both existing people, buy in and not make it feel like, oh, he's just onto something else that's not relevant to me anymore. And it will also help new people understand, why is the healthcare guy talking about tech founders or whatever, right? It's like, no, this is actually creating that narrative arc. The next thing is, and this is the last of these, is you want to ask yourself, how are you going to judge if this pivot or expansion is working? And I think it's really helpful to, at the beginning of anything you do, think through, okay, I'm going to make these changes. What does it look like? What are the signs that I'm looking for? Because it's not as simple as, in some cases, it may be more clients, audience growth, more money, more whatever, but it may not be. It might be less. It might be like, you know what? I want to work with fewer clients and charge more. Or I want to work with, for example, for me, I pivoted my business a bit a few years ago from 90% consulting revenue to more of a products model. And over the course of 3 years, this year was the first year that the majority of my revenue came from products, right? So it's gone from 90% services to now this year was 59% products. So that is a metric that I was able to look at and adjust. Is this working? Is this shift working? How am I going to know? And I think that's really the question to ask yourself. How are you going to know if this pivot, if this expansion is working? And understanding that metric, it doesn't have to be money, doesn't have to be clients. It could be satisfaction. You could go, you know what? A year from now, I'm a lot happier with the people I'm working with now than I was the people I was working with. But understanding for you, I think it's really helpful because again, then you can optimize for that. And then you can avoid the frustration of, oh no, I'm making 10% less this year than I did last year. You didn't optimize for money. You said working was about, do you like the clients you're working with better? Then it's working. The money is a separate issue, right? So I think those 4 questions are worth spending some time thinking about before you shift your niche.